Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Norwich Talk for another video. Well. Where do we start? My initial sort of plan was to make a match reaction. I thought about doing a stream, but I think we'll save that for another time. But instead of calling it a match reaction, I'm going to be calling it a video just about Dean Smith because after tonight's game, if you were there, you know. If you weren't there, you've probably heard. Um, Time for change. It's time for change at Norwich City. There's no way back now for me. Not for me, but in my opinion, for Dean Smith at Norwich City. It seems like it's a matter of time. It kind of has that vibe of he won't see the end of the season, but it's about when the decision is made. Norwich City are a club in a position where they need to get promoted to be financially healthy. Under Dean Smith, I don't think that's going to happen. So they've got to make a decision. They've got to pull the trigger sooner rather than later. But with things like this in the past, it's always felt a bit like when the decision is made, it's always too little too late. So I can very much see that happening. But yeah, where do we start with this? I think let's talk about tonight's game as a game of football. That's a top five, top four, whatever you want to call it, clash in the Championship, that game of football, and it was abysmal. Norwich City, as a collective of players on that pitch, weren't actually the worst. That isn't the worst we've seen Norwich City play. Yet I'm feeling as deflated as I did the day we lost 7-1 to Colchester, in the sense of it's depressing, it's dull, it's uninspired. Everything that was personal about Norwich City has just gone out of the window. There are no players on that pitch who you think will take the game by the scruff of the neck and become a cult hero. Sure, there are popular players, but all we're clinging on to is the hope, essentially, that someone will come in and sort of get something out of this squad. Dean Smith isn't that man. He really isn't that man. And after tonight, it's more clear than ever. As soon as you hear the chants of we want Dino out and Dean Smith, your football is curse word, you think, yeah, you don't come back from that as a manager. And that's before we get into the tweet I've just seen from Chris Gorham, which kind of sparked this video, to be honest. It was comments along the line of the fans have wanted this narrative. You have to be 2-0 up before the fans, or to get the fans on side. And just things like that, really are, I should quote it directly, but I'm sure we'll all see it at some point. That kind of sparks and kicks off what is looking to be like a civil war at Norwich City. And let's look at the bigger picture for a second. I think from the outside, and I can't really speak as an outsider, but I kind of feel like if you look at Norwich City, you think it's champagne problems, in the sense of we're in the top six. We've got results this season. We've played well at times this season. It kind of seems a bit like, well, what are you complaining about? But when you're in the top six in the Championship, when you're in that playoff place, and your fans are singing for your manager to be sacked, it speaks volumes. And for me, that volume is of the persuasion that the football is dull, the football is uninspiring. And as I said earlier, that personal connection between Norwich City has just faded. And I don't know how we get it back. I don't see it coming back soon. You look at the very top of the club, Stuart Webber, a man we once sung the praises of on a regular basis, due to his transparency, his wonderful decision making in the Championship, his really impressive recruitment. He like that. You look at the very top. That relationship is severed. We are thinking and we are feeling the complete opposite. I'm thinking, does he care at this point? And as a fan, it's easy for me to sit here and not know him personally and be part of the conversations that he's a part of. But that's the way it's being perceived when you set a standard of transparency and then just out of nowhere rip it to shreds. How else can you what else can you infer from the situation? You look at the shambolic situation with the local media, and then the stubbornness from the club, and Anthony Richards talking about a lack of disconnect and it being played up by the media. I would love to see what he would say now. Not that I necessarily think they were his views. I think he was just a puppet in that situation. Um, but yeah, Dean Smith again, another example of not really much personality, no effort with the fans, as far as I'm aware. There's no connection with the fans. With Daniel Farker, you felt that personal connection, but we aren't going to sit here and talk about Daniel Farker. But it's time for change, and I don't see two ways about it. I find it difficult, really, because at Carrow Road tonight, I had two people behind me who I think are there regularly, and they were sort of talking about the opposite views to mine, in the sense of, I think they were getting frustrated at the booing, and saying that it's stupid to want Norwich to clip it long, but I don't think that's necessarily what Carrow Road wants. I think Carrow Road just wants to see some initiative on the pitch. I think that's a big thing. You look at Liam Gibbs when he came on the pitch. He performed all right. He showed a bit of initiative. He got on the ball and he tried to drive forward, and we're asking for the bare minimum. I have no idea how Norwich City have got in the position they are in terms of being, was it fourth or fifth in the league. I say I have no idea. I do. The standard of the Championship is abysmal, which is why Norwich are up there. But that's the one thing that's missing for me at the moment. It's just initiative, creativity, bravery, just a willingness to I don't even know how to describe it, to be honest with you. Just some sort of breakthrough, or just, I want to be able to leave Carrow Road and feel like I've paid to watch a team that care. It doesn't seem like that anymore. And the comments post game from Grant Hanley, which I've listened back to, suggest, I think he's like the fans. He's deflated. You look at that squad. There's an interesting mixture of. I think that squad is about as Championship as a squad gets, in terms of, there are some good players in there, there are some average players in there, and there are some abysmal players in there. We'll start with abysmal. Off the top of my head, Hanley, Gibson, McLean. McLean I don't think was that bad tonight, but in general, not good at all. Denelson Annie. Sorry, but I'm kind of done. I'm kind of bored of him, to be honest with you. And then you've got all right players like Sam McCallum, who's another example. Who was in the I can't remember who was in the midfield three now. Isaac Hayden, he's all right. He's not particularly done much, but as a CDM, you can't expect sort of a world beater. And then you've got your players that you like, so your Sargents, your Pookies. Dare I draw the line there? Angus Gunn, maybe Max Aarons, although he's kind of slipping into that average category. And it's Dean Smith's job to sort of find a balance to get the best out of the really good players, get them players involved as much as you can, sort of keep the not so good players off the ball as much as you can, and let them sort of highlight their qualities, their individual qualities. But there's no plan, and it's a bit like me for this video, to be honest with you. There's no real sort of structure to Norwich City, which is a massive problem. You look at Norwich from the back outwards, Ben Gibson, Grant Hanley, just don't know what they're doing on the ball, which it's painful to watch. And the thing is you look at them as players, and when a player isn't sort of good at everything, you look at one specific attribute that makes a player good, and you expect to see that on a regular basis. With Max Aarons, it's his blistering pace. With someone like Onel Hernandez, for example, it's his blistering pace. It's his ability to take a player on. But there are so many players in there, handling Gibson, where they just aren't really good at anything. Gibson, as an example, I'm sorry to sort of pile on Gibson. He was a player getting sort of ironically jeered tonight when he completed a pass, especially the backwards ones. Can't run, can't pass, can't defend, can't win a header, yet is playing every week. We spent £8 million on him. Grant Hanley has slipped into that category of really just not very good defensively, on the ball, never been brilliant, that's no secret. But then there are other players like Sam McCallum, where he's all right, but I don't really get his game. He's not sort of a really attacking fullback, but he also isn't particularly great at defending. Max Aarons is slowly slipping into that, because it's almost like he's playing with shackles on, in the sense of he's being held back. Tonight, he ventured forward a little bit, But we always knew Max Aarons is not the best defender, but he was always someone who'd get on the ball and drive. You watched his game develop from he'd get the ball and go around the outside to Daniel Farke's second title winning season where he'd get the ball and bring it inside and be a bit more confident. The Max Aarons we see now is a shadow of his former self, and we've seen really good football from him. And that was under Daniel Farke, and we look at him now and you think, well, Dean Smith's been here long enough to impact his game, and has he impacted his game? I don't think so. I think if anything, what I'm saying makes it sound like he's regressed. But I struggle with Norwich at the moment. So like Danel Sanani as well. I don't really get what he is. He sort of started off as one of those players who drift in and out of a game, but he's not particularly quick. Not particularly willing to take players on. A couple of skewed shots tonight. Is he a number 10? Is he a wide man? Is he a striker? It's not maybe necessarily his decision. It should be Dean Smith's decision to find that position. But it just isn't working. McLean's another example of a player who works hard. He runs a lot, but beyond that, not great at passing, not great at tackling, can't shoot. I don't know. Everything's kind of going wrong at the moment. And the way I look at it, the conclusion that I would like to draw is I would very much like Norwich City to... I don't know. It's kind of a... I think in my head it's a difficult one because I want Norwich to get a manager in. It doesn't have to be a young manager necessarily, but it has to be a manager who's willing to be open and commit to a style of football and commit to a project. I think we need to see a project again. We need something to believe in. That's how we got on side in the first place with Daniel Farke. We were constantly believing in the project, and the project doesn't even necessarily have to work. We just have to know what we're paying for. At the moment, there's nothing to believe in. We don't know what we're paying for. No one's open. No one's honest. And everything is just going horribly wrong, and, I know I'll maybe get a few comments saying this is a poor suggestion, but Russell Martin is the example of, if you've got him in, he's got a clear style of football. You can speak to any Swansea fan, any MK Dons fan. He's got a philosophy. He would have the connection with the club. Whether that's positive or negative, I don't know. But if he was to take the job, you'd think it would be a positive one. This isn't me necessarily saying it has to be Russ Martin, but a young manager who's making his name in the game, who would be committed to a project. But the problem is Norwich City can't necessarily do that because, as Anthony Richardson said in his interview recently, I say recently, it's probably months ago now, Norwich need to get promoted, or financially, I don't think it's the end of the world, but we'd have to sell assets, and I don't think we have any assets to sell. In the past, we've had James Maddison, Ben Godfrey, Jamal Lewis, Emi Buendia, etc., etc. Who's that player now? There's been reports of Gabriel Sara being scouted by Torino. That's not going to fix Norwich City's financial problems. So yeah, we're in a really difficult position, and I'm not one who boos at games. I'm not necessarily against it, but it's not something I ever do. But I was kind of sat there just thinking, well, what else are they supposed to do? And the players in the game, they lost their heads tonight, and yeah, it's kind of entertaining to see a bit of a scrap, but also it's clearly a group of players who just don't necessarily care anymore. And I don't mean that in the sense of they're taking the mick out of the fans. It's as in that's how they get their frustration out. It's almost like they've not given up, but they're more interested in fighting each other than, not each other, but fighting other players and then getting into little scuffles and stuff like that. But yeah, they're kind of my thoughts. Dean Smith has to go, and it has to be soon. It needs to be now, essentially. But yeah, I can very much see a situation of too little, too late playing out for Norwich. I'm not even fussed if we don't get promoted this season because the Premier League's just as rubbish, but in a slightly different way. In that Norwich get battered every week. But yeah, that's everything. Dean Smith's got to go. I don't necessarily dislike him as a person. He seems like an all right guy. That's why I think the jeering and the chants is not unnecessary, but bit like, as a person, I'm just a bit like, oh, that must be quite horrible to have 25,000 or 15,000, however many were there tonight, chanting your football's rubbish. That must be pretty painful. But at the same time, I'm just sat there like, well, they're not wrong, are they? The fans aren't wrong. And the comments sparking the civil war. Oh man, it's tough. It's tough. But yeah, it is, compared to what it was, say, 2 years ago or 4 years ago when Norwich City were pushing for promotion under Daniel Farker. Even in the Premier League, I remember sort of around this time, the first time in the Premier League with Daniel Farker, when we weren't necessarily winning games, but we were having good first halves and dodgy second halves. We still believed in what we were watching. We still left games entertained. It was just sloppy mistakes costing them, but it's not the case anymore. And yeah, I don't, a lot of us, well, not a lot of us, we all pay a lot of money to go and watch Norwich. And yeah, all right, you get the old, oh, don't go if you don't like it. Shut up if that's your argument. It's football. You're attached to your football club. You go, dare I say, support. You go and watch them. For myself, we're to the club bonded for life. It's not as simple as you just don't go. But yeah, I don't know. This has been a messy video. If you've made it this far, I'm very impressed. But yeah, I don't have a clue anymore about Norwich. It needs to change, and it needs to change now. But I think it needs to change from the very top, because I just don't believe in anything at the club anymore. And it's costing a lot of money as well for us. But hey ho, it's only a game, isn't it? But yeah, if you made it this far, greatly appreciated. Hope you enjoyed watching. Well, if you have or haven't, hope you enjoyed this meltdown. I guess it's a bit of a meltdown, really, isn't it? But yeah, I'm hoping to sort of return to the streaming game. Get some live streams going, get some conversations going, have a chat, see what's going on. Suggestions, all these kind of things. I always enjoy engaging with whoever watches these videos. It's always a fun thing, but hopefully getting back into that soon. Match reactions, match previews. I don't know. The consistency of this channel is just kind of up in the air at the moment. It's not going anywhere, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a difficult thing. I'm sure you understand, in terms of, I don't want to just churn out rubbish and doing sort of previews for Luton away where we know we're going to go and lose 1-0. It's just not for me. But yeah, goodness me. Yeah, that's all I've got for you, I'm afraid. Keep your eyes on Twitter for notice of the next stream. Yeah, that's all I've got. I'm in my head, I'm thinking maybe I'd cut this and edit this, but no, we'll leave it raw, and we'll go from there. But thank you very much for watching. Like if you want to, subscribe if you fancy it, and I'll see you in the next one.